Hey, I'm back. Streaming again. I'm working on the next stage of the project I did 2 days ago. Honestly, the days kind of mixed together at this point. But yeah, so I'm continuing off where I left off last time we were streaming. We were transferring files, not transferring, but exporting, bouncing the individual tracks from Logic to Pro Tools to prepare for mixing, and then I, imported all the things into Pro Tools, got everything set up, got everything color coded and organized and labeled properly, and gain staged. So, at this point we're starting with, getting sort of a rough mix, which is like, is working ahead and isn't working ahead because things are going to change once the vocals and everything comes in. But, not everything's going to change. So, it is still getting a little bit of a leg up. It is also going to give a little bit of a better sounding track to for the artist to record over, so they can just feel the vibe a little bit better. It'll be balanced a little bit better. So, so that's what I'm working on today. I'm eating dinner right now as well, so you can watch me eat dinner. I'm gonna try to avoid making this video an ASMR video or like a weird mukbang thing. Of me just like eating noodles, which I am eating noodles, but not like ramen noodles. Like I'm eating like forgot to turn my mood lighting on. So I'm eating some pasta with some chicken and broccoli with like an Alfredo sauce. So I'll just be eating that throughout the beginning portion of this video. But I'll try not to eat into the microphone. Yeah, and I'll just be working. You guys can talk to me, ask me questions, chat with me. I'll respond to them as I see them. Whether you're on YouTube or Twitch, I don't know if I ever even really bring it up, but I stream on YouTube and Twitch. So if you're watching this on YouTube, you can also watch me on Twitch if you happen to be on Twitch. If you're on Twitch, you can happen to watch me on YouTube if you just happen to be on YouTube. You can also watch my post-stream upload. The stream that you're watching right now will be on YouTube in its entirety, shortly after the stream is completed. So if you miss any of my streams, you can go ahead and watch those over on YouTube. I am planning on creating some additional content for YouTube exclusively that is a little bit more pre-planned and pre-executed, i.e. a normal video and not a live stream. But I'm not ready to reveal that yet. I will probably announce that once I have the video prepped. I do have a working logo for that, so I'm excited to unveil that. It's nothing crazy, but it's a logo. So I'll keep you updated on that as I develop that out and start getting that filmed. But yeah, so, just gonna keep working on this and, that kind of stuff. All right. Oh yeah, another thing. If this is your first time seeing me, hi, I'm Matt Johnson, and this is Matt Johnson Audio, and I'm a producer engineer based in New Jersey, and this channel is here to host some live streams of just the work that I'm doing, and to eventually create some more video content based on music and audio, and yeah, so if you want to follow me on my social medias, if you look up into the upper right corner, if you look up into the upper right corner, you can see my social media. My Instagram is @MattJohnsonAudio. My Facebook is MattJohnsonAudio. And my website is MattJohnsonAudio.com. On my website, you can see my professional details. And if you are interested in working with me, then you can go to my website, find details, contact me. You can see my prices and everything like that. So yeah, and then if you just want to, I don't know, be my friend or something, you can go ahead and follow me on my Instagram. I use that for more casual communication, as well as you will see updates on my future streams and just the other things that are going on in my life and career. So yeah, all right, let's get back to this. All right, so I'd like to, when I'm doing this kind of stuff, I really like to take in chunks, basically. So like basically I'm going to isolate the drums. If we go to the mix window, you can see that I have everything pulled down. I have everything grouped together. I have everything in groups. I have the all audio tracks here. I have the drums, bass, keys, and extra effects stuff, all in their own individual groups as well, so that I can adjust their overall volumes together. I have all of them routed into sub buses for each one of those groups, so that I can put bus processing or sub bus processing, and then those are feeding into then the master bus, which sometimes I will I will put a sub master, which is literally just the master bus, but not the master bus. It's just a pre bus, but that's for very more specific things. I've really only had one circumstance where I really needed to have a master sub bus, but yeah, so I'll use it when I need to. I don't really use it when I don't need to. To kind of break down my view of templates, or presets, whatever your preferred lingo is. I'm not a huge fan of templates as a specific, like, pre-saved or pre-set up kind of thing. Really, the only template I have is like having a click and a master bus, and like that's it. Because realistically, so many tracks have so many different setups. Now that being said, I do have a specific process. So instead of using templates, what I do instead of templates is I have a specific way I do things, or a specific set of personal guidelines that I will follow. So things like, for example, putting everything into their sub buses, the certain way I color code things, the order that I set everything up. I always do drums, bass. I basically try to do it from high to low, or like kind of like a score order. If you're familiar with like traditional music composition, you generally have like a certain score order where you usually have like really high like woodwinds on top. You have flutes and clarinets and oboe, or depending on if it's jazz, it might be, saxophones. And then you go to brass. You basically like set it into each section, and then like within that you kind of layer that from top to bottom. I basically do what I would say is the reverse of that, where I usually go like I think of it from top to bottom versus bottom to top, which is like the more traditional composer type setup in terms of the like score order. So I'll usually, I always want drums on the top, because realistically that's kind of the order that I work in, is from like drums to vocals. And so that's kind of just how I set that up. Sorry, I thought the stream dropped, but we're good. So yeah, so basically what I do is, instead of presetting everything up, like I'll basically just have like a very specific way of doing things that I basically do every time, and then within that construct of guidelines that I've set for myself, I can then create alterations based on the needs of the project. Especially considering like my general setup is based off of like a more traditional organic instrumentation, so like a rock band instrumentation, like where it's like traditionally like a drum set, and then bass guitar, and then one or more guitars, and then maybe keys, and then vocals with maybe but probably backup vocals. So I kind of keep it within that structure. Like what you can kind of see, like I took the drums. It's not a drum set, but I turned it into a drum set, a set of drums. It is very much set up the exact same way I would do for a drum set. The bass, same thing. A lot of times, you have a DI signal bass and the amp recording simultaneously. So this is basically the same thing. I would route it the exact same way, except there wouldn't be a stereo aspect to any of the bass guitar stuff. The pads is basically just like as if there were a keyboard player in a rock band. I would, the same thing. Essentially, this is the same setup I would have for a rock band, except there's no guitars. So I've basically like have a set of guidelines that I can follow, and so that every time I have a project, I know exactly the process to follow. But if there is some sort of variation where that process needs to step out of the way for a second, then I can remove that rather than having to go into a template and being like, okay, now I have to I set up this template to save me time, but I still have to delete this, rearrange that, move this over here, recolor code this, I'd rather just do the work up front and just be able to okay, I have to change this, I kind of have to change that, I have to recolor this, okay, there's this many tracks, so my normal thing isn't going to work, so I usually will give myself, I will have a specific way of doing things, but then give myself the flexibility to adjust when I need. I think that is probably, at least for the way that I work, is the most efficient way. I feel like if you had a very, very specific set of types of work that you were working on, if your main primary demographic was rock artists, then you could probably get away with creating a standardized template. I think once you start to get into modern pop and hip hop, and stuff where you have more electronic instruments, you have way more instruments than a rock or country or folk or Americana or something like that is going to have, because they generally will limit themselves to we want to be able to play this live, with people, or it might be a band, and so that also sort of constricts the sort of production elements to okay, we have a band, we're generally going to keep it so that we can play this as a band, maybe bring in a couple musicians, okay, we're going to bring in a keyboard player, but we don't normally have a keyboard player, kind of thing. That is kind of the extent of that kind of thing, although there are people that are now expanding into going beyond that, which I think is cool. But when it comes to hip hop and pop and EDM and that kind of stuff, you have, literally an almost infinite list of synthesizers and electronic drums and back in the day you had at most 2 snare drums, and that meant you had to have a physical snare drum to do that. You physically had to put 2 snare drums, versus now every section of the song could have a different snare type, the backbeat part of the beat of the kit, even just, another song that I'm working on with another artist that is not this song, there's 2 snare sounds, especially when you get into claps and snaps and all that kind of stuff, and progressing that sort of thing through the track. I mean, definitely, it definitely is going to create a lot more variation than you would typically see when you're limited to having physical instruments. So, yeah. Okay. So, getting into the rough mix here. I'm gonna start with the drums. So I basically like to isolate the drums. I'll usually go to the most the stuff with the where basically the most elements are happening in the track. So in this case it's usually the hook, which in this case it is. Kind of, it's usually the place where all of the elements are being used. There's usually tom fills. There's usually, the hi-hats going, the ride cymbals going, this and that. You're really hitting the kick drums, a little bit more active and that kind of thing. So, I'll usually go to the hook. And then I'll isolate the drums. And then I'll basically just kind of balance from here. Like, I'll get the drums sounding good by itself. If I were dealing with a more full drum setup, things with like overheads and rooms and toms and that kind of thing. I'll also deal in the panning. I already have the hi-hat pan because I know exactly where it needs to be based on how I had it in the Logic project. Usually if I have a physical drum set with overheads and that kind of thing where the stereo spectrum of the drum set is sort of determined by the natural stereo placement of the microphones, of the overhead mics and the room mics, depending on if they do like a close XY or if they do a space pair or Glenn Johns or whatever setup, that's going to change the natural stereo field of the set, of the whole set. And so I will usually try to match, if the hi-hat's going to be somewhere, over here or over there, depending on how they have it set up. It might be closer in, it might be farther out. The toms might be very far away if it's a space pair. If it's an XY, it's going to be very tight. It's going to be almost mono, basically. So, that's the sort of thing. I'll sort of start to do that process during this stage of the game. In this case, there's no overheads, and I already know where the hi-hats should be. So they're already set, So I'm just going to go in and balance things. Dun, dun, dun. Yeah, so I'm just starting with getting it a little bit balanced. It's a lot easier when there's only 4 elements to the track and there's no bleed or anything. I'm just making sure that the drums by themselves as a whole, they sound good together. The hi-hat's not overtaking this and that. The kick is kind of giving the presence, the volume presence that I'm looking for overall. And then as I start to go through, if I think the drums are too loud, then I can put the group on and I can bring the whole thing down relative. So this sort of ratio here of, kick to snare to hi-hat to shaker is going to be the same. I'm just going to bring it up or down as a whole in relation to each other. Yeah. So you also want to make sure that you're not clipping on multiple fronts. As you add the sub buses, you're creating extra layers. You obviously you want to make sure that it's not clipping, it's not clipping on the individual channel itself, which is both a recording thing and a gain staging thing, and then also just watching your faders as you move them. But then it's also going to be feeding into this sub bus here, so you want to make sure that is not, and you can't just be like, oh well, the kick isn't clipping, so it's fine, because you're literally building up volume. Like you're stacking elements on top of each other, so you're creating more volume to fill up the sub bus. So yeah, then I'll usually go in and I'll do some like very like utility kind of things with EQ and compression. Nothing creative or fancy at this point. Yeah, so go in. Honestly, I like the stock Pro Tools EQ for this kind of thing because it's simple. It's simple and it's clean. It doesn't really do anything to the sound beyond just pulling and boosting frequencies. So, yeah. If I'm dealing with actual acoustic recorded instruments, I'm definitely going to put a high pass. Wait, did I say low? Yeah, a high pass. I'm confusing myself because I thought I said it wrong, and then I did say it wrong, and then I thought I didn't say it wrong. I thought my correction was wrong, and then, but yeah. So I'll usually put a high pass. These are not acoustically recorded drums, obviously. So basically, what I'm gonna do is I am gonna put a high pass filter on it. I'm gonna put it really, really sharp, as sharp as it can go, 24 decibels per octave. And then I'm literally going to do it so it only comes up to here, and like that's it. Like it's just going to kind of make sure that there's nothing below 20 hertz that's just going to take up signal or whatever. Especially when it's electronic stuff, there is so much more low end in these kind of samples than an acoustic kick. So I just want to make sure that there's no inaudible like sub frequencies that are just going to make it muddy and disgusting, and that's going to add weird extra harmonic content to the rest of the audible signal. So this is just kind of like there's probably nothing there. You can't even hear it anyway, but like I'd rather have it there and, just avoid some stuff where, like, I'm getting down towards the end of the project. I'm like, man, something's not working. Like, and then it's like, oh, there's just, like, there's too much, like, low end, like, going on. There's, like, some kind of, like, like, I'd rather just cut it and kill it. All right, so now I'm going to go through. I'm going to do some, what do they call this in school? Notch filtering. I'm like, what's the term they used? Notch filtering. Because you're literally you're gonna put it into a peak, especially this low one. You're gonna make sure it's peak. You're gonna bring it up all the way, so it's the smallest Q that you can have. And then I'm gonna play it. I'm gonna isolate just the kick, and then if you hold a Shift and Control, which is not the control if you're on Windows, this is not the same control. If you're on Windows, I believe it is the. Is there an option button on Windows? Honestly, it's been years since I've like regularly used a Windows computer, except for like at work. I think it might be like the Alt button or something like that. But yeah, it's the button directly below the Shift button. I'm not totally sure if it's the same, if they like make an alteration for the Windows version, or if they just make it the other button, So you hold those two, and then when you move this, it's gonna isolate it so you hear just that. So I'm gonna go through. I'm gonna listen for any like problem frequencies, and kind of pull that out. So this is probably like the fundamental of the kick. It's really boomy though, so I'm gonna just dip it out just a tiny bit. See, like this is just washy. Do, do. And then you do this. Doom. It's very much, it articulates it much better. I'm just notching that out just a tiny bit. I'm actually probably going to go in and boost the, I heard it like just above it. It sounded much better. I'm probably going to go in and boost that like in a different way. I like to keep like certain stages, like, you know, I'm only going to cut this EQ here. I'm only going to cut. So I know that the first EQ is just cutting. That's where I'm doing cutting. You know, it keeps things organized instead of doing a little thing here, a little thing there. And then it's like, you're just going through plugins. Like where did I do this? When did I do this? Like, all right. So then you go to the next one. See that frequency, that I'm going to boost, like the one right next to this. It's a little bit more, what is it, like 60? I cut like just below 50. Yeah, like I'm going to boost that later. I'm going to cut this down just a little bit. It's kind of wishy-washy. Go to this one. So see, this is just a little bit too prominent. It's a weird high, like overtone, like that just doesn't feel like it blends with the rest of the sound. Like that when you don't, you know, this doesn't sound like it fits with that. Now I hear like one more thing. It's very clicky, especially once we pulled some of these out. So I'm going to try to find that click. There. I think that's it. Yeah, I think it was this one. Yeah, can you hear that? You might not be able to hear that through the stream, but yeah, that sounds a lot better. So we'll listen to the before and the after, and you can hear the difference. So this is before. Cool. So then, you might say like, "Oh, I like the sound of the original better," and I would say the same thing too. But what I'm gonna at least attempt to do is try to make it try to recreate that a little cleaner. It's just a little boomy. It's a little muddy. So I'm gonna try to get that a little more of that length that there was when it was boomy and muddy, but without it being as boomy and muddy, make it a little bit more controlled sounding. So what I'll then do is I'm gonna do one of my favorite plugins of all time is the F6. It's the Waves F6. It's sort of like a multi-band compressor, but they call it a dynamic EQ. Whereas a multi-band compressor is like very large. Like you're basically going to take the whole frequency spectrum and basically cut it into like, 3 or 4 or 5 or what is it, C6? So I think it's 6 segments. This is also 6 segments plus low and high pass filtering, but except it functions much more like an EQ, where you're, instead of creating like segments where like basically the way that a multi-band compressor works is like if you're gonna move, so the lowest section is a larger section, you're gonna make the section next to it smaller. Like you can't add to one frequency range without taking away from another, basically. And so versus this, literally, it literally functions as an EQ. Like you can literally just whoop whoop, regular EQ. So how do I'm just gonna undo this. It literally functions as an EQ. It literally is an EQ. But what you can do is you can basically say, okay, I want this EQ point to do its thing. However, I only want it to boost or cut when it hits a certain threshold, and only at that specific frequency that I've set. So, I referred to on here when I cut these 2 bottom frequencies, that right in between it, there was something I really liked there. So instead of so instead of just boosting, because again, that's going to make it a little muddy if you just boost it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use this to only temporarily boost it, only when the kick is hitting, basically. So it was somewhere around 60. I'll do like 62, although 2 hertz is like inaudible, but it doesn't really matter. But it's somewhere around 60 And then basically like here you have the gain setting, which is like your traditional EQ. You're just gonna boost or cut. Here you have range, which is basically how much you want to boost your cut, but only when it passes the threshold. So I'm gonna boost it like maybe like 2 or 3 dB, just a small amount. I'll start with 2, see how that goes. I want this to right away. I'll play with the release in a second, but so you'll see right here, it's showing the threshold. I'm gonna bring this down, and you can see it jumping up and down like that. I'm gonna bring the Q in a little tighter. See, so now it's just a little bit more. It's got a little bit of that body, but only temporarily. I might put this up to 3. And I might bring this in a little tighter. It's very subtle. Basically, if you're not listening for it, you're not going to hear it. But it is adding a little bit of that body. So yeah. So then, I don't know if I want to add any high end. Honestly, this is a surprisingly clicky kick. For like basically a hip hop kick. I'm not gonna mess around with that yet until I kind of get the bass and the synth bass going. Because when you do add like bass and kick, they like live very close together. And so basically, like in every song, you have to make a choice. Is the kick going to be the low thing, or is the bass going to be the low thing? And that depends both on genre and personal taste. Where things like in like a rock band, you might want your low end more geared towards the kick. Versus in hip hop, like it's really all about that sub bass, and the kick is just kind of there, so to speak. I feel like sometimes in hip hop there isn't even a kick. It's literally just an 808 bass, which is technically a kick. You're just having pitched kicks basically. And most of the time, if in that scenario, even if there is a kick, it's literally always lined up with the 808 bass, and is just giving a little bit of that front end to that 808 kick, 808 bass. So, like, exactly in that scenario, you went, okay, the 808 bass, the bass line, that is what needs the low end in this situation. The kick is complementing the bass versus in like a rock situation, you might have a little bit more distortion on the bass. It might be a little grittier. they might be playing with a pick. So in that scenario, you kind of want a big rock and kicked, that's really going to lay down the law, and that bass player is then going to complement and add that thick, that sort of thick, low mid kind of upper low frequency kind of content, where it's more complementing the guitar that is usually there, or that kind of thing. Versus when you listen to a ballad, there might not even be drums at all. So in that case, most of the time when you hear a bass of some sort, it is very low. It is very low and it's very booming. It's very much filling out that low end because there's no kick to even bother. So, so that's sort of the thing that you have to consider when you're doing that is the bass complementing something else, like a guitar above it, or is it realistically laying down that low foundation of the song? Is the bass the foundation, or is the kick the foundation? And that's kind of personal preference, specific social situation, and also genre based. In hip hop generally, the kick is there to complement the bass versus the other way around. So generally you will want a higher frequency kick with a little less low end and a little bit more articulation, so that it will give a little impact to the bass line. So anyway, moving on. I'm going to do the same thing for the snare. I might do a little bit of compression on the kick. I'm going to do the compression after I've touched up the snare and the rest of the drums, and then I'll do some compression. I very much am the kind of person who does more EQ into compression rather than the other way around. Usually, everything I do goes EQ into compression, except for vocals. Usually, unless I really want some really intense vocals, I'll usually do compression into EQ, just because with vocals you're much more trying to shape the timbre a little bit more than you normally would for another instrument, although that's not totally true either. But and I mean, there, when I say I mostly go EQ into compression, what I mean is most of the EQ will be behind the compression, and then if I really, really want to, I'll throw another EQ after the compressor to really shape the timbre a little bit more, versus just trying to kind of adjust the blend. Because basically when you go EQ into compression, it's all right, I'm going to kind of change the timbre of this, and then I'm just going to kind of smash everything back together. It's it's sort of okay, I'm going to take these M&Ms, I'm going to spill them out, I'm going to pull out all the green ones, and then I'm going to put the rest back in the bowl kind of thing. And now you still have a bowl of M&Ms, but now there's just less green or no green or whatever. Versus EQ after compression is kind of is kind of like, okay, you dumped the bowl of M&Ms out, you pulled all the green ones out, you put it back in the bowl without the green ones, and then now you're adding extra. Are there blue M&Ms? There must be. There definitely isn't peanut M&Ms. I never eat regular M&Ms, so like, are those the same colors as the peanut M&Ms? They're just bigger. I guess there's blue M&Ms. I guess whatever. Like, you pull the green M&Ms out, and then put the rest back in the bowl, and then add more blue M&Ms. That's kind of like EQ after compression. It's like, okay, like, we've kind of condensed this, but now I kind of want to add a little bit. I kind of want to make up for the less M&Ms for a little bit more blue. I want the overall color. I want the overall M&M rainbow to be a little bit more blue than it normally would be standard. But I also want it to be less green, but I don't want less green to really affect the overall nature of the bowl of M&Ms, kind of thing. So it's like, okay, I'm going to pull this out. I'm going to kind of shape this a little bit. And then I'm going to compress it to kind of make it back to normal, but with some of those changes. And then I'll put another EQ if I want like a real audible, real change. Like, I want this to sound totally different. I want more high in this. I want more low in this. I'm that's where I'm going to do a little bit more of the drastic kind of like, what I would call, seat of your pants kind of like EQ, where it's like, yeah, I'm just going to take this thing, I'm going to move it. Does that sound good? No, I'm going to shift it. Okay, never mind, I don't want that. Or I want this. I want it to here. Actually, no, let me try a different EQ. Like, where it's just like, you're kind of just, not even really looking at it. You're just kind of like, does it sound good? Okay, I like it. Like, whereas this is much more facilitated. When you're kind of doing the cutting, it's much more specific. It's much more refined. It's not just like, the equivalent of grabbing a knob and turning it. Like your Chris Lord-Alge, he just like, he just like grabs the fucking EQ knob and just cranks it all the way and goes, yeah, that boost sounds good. I'll generally kind of save that for like the final, like after the compression, after the kind of tone shaping, then I'll kind of just like, yeah, I want more high on this, less low on that. I want more mids on this. I want, this and that, that kind of thing. All right. So moving on to the snare, isolate the snare, get another EQ. Okay, so So I'm pretty sensitive to high frequencies. They make my eyes flinch severely. So I like to use that as a little bit of a trick. Oh crap! I had the wrong camera up the whole time. There you go. Now you can see. Sorry about that. So I'm pretty sensitive to high frequencies, and they, especially when they're isolated. So basically, when I go into the really high frequencies of a snare or a hi-hat or something like that, basically if my eyes start to twitch, I know it's a bad frequency. So I will I'm like, okay, like this blue one, it's around 5K. Like my eyes started twitching. I was like, oh, I'm gonna pull that out. Like that's the thing that's making me go crazy. It's like a dog whistle. Yeah. So let me go back. I'll show you the kick stuff, that just in case it was covered by the camera, which it probably was. So this is what I got for the kick here. Got some 3 low kind of thing, and then this one high one. And then this is the F6. I'm actually going to turn the real time off because that's just using processing power. So basically, let me show you here now that you can see. With this F6 with the kick, you can see that it's only going to boost that one spot when it gets past this threshold that I've set. Let me play with this. Yeah, okay. Okay. You always want to make sure that when you're doing EQ and compression that your outgoing signal is equal to your incoming signal. So I just put a whole bunch of cuts here. So I'm literally removing the signal. So thusly I had to turn it up, was at 2.5 dB. I basically had to compensate the output of the plugin so that it's an equivalent volume. It is peaking at the same signal level, but now is with a some stuff cut. So we can do the snare here. I'll play it and then I'll show you the before and after. So this is before, and then I'll put it in. It's just a little bit more focused. It's got some of this nonsense pulled out of it. So it's not killing dogs. Yeah, so I think I want a little bit more low end, just a little bit more body to the snare. So again, I'm going to use the F6 to make just a temporary boost. So what you can do is you can actually solo this on the F6. So you hear just the range that you're working with. So I kind of want something. This is a little bit too boomy for me. This is a bit too knocky for me. I want something in the middle, something right there. A little bit of both. So then I'm going to put the range up. We'll start with 3. It's not tape, so we can change it. I want this instantaneously. Okay. Bring this down. I'm going to make this just a tad wider. It's pretty subtle. Honestly, I can barely hear it myself, and I'm actually listening for it, but it'll do something. That's the other thing is when you have really broad EQ stuff, like you're gonna hear a little bit less. It's like gonna be a little less obvious than when you have really tight ones and you're boosting. So yeah, so got this and that. So I'll do this kick and snare, and we'll do a before and after, so you can hear, now the compounded. Yeah, I like that. All right, now we'll move on to the hi-hat. I hate EQing hi-hats. They're so high. Like, there's so many high frequencies. Actually, I think I might have EQ'd this in Logic, so it might not be too bad. All right, so as I scrolled through this, I could hear that there basically was no signal until you got to hear or hear or whatever. So I'm just moving There's nothing here except stuff that is gonna hurt you in the long run. So just gonna can't hurt to put a high pass filter. There's nothing there, so it's not affecting the sound of, the only thing that's there might be inaudible, but it might be screwing with your stuff. So cutting it whether it's there or not. All right. Just a real little bit. Honestly, this hi-hat isn't as bad as some other ones. That one's a little bit better. When you're working with hi-hats particularly, you're looking for more what we call whistle tones. So like when you're dealing with kick, you're like probably not going to find a whistle tone. If you do find a whistle tone, that means like there was some kind of like, whatever. That shouldn't be normal. Like I rarely ever find a whistle tone unless it's like an extremely like flappy high, if there's a lot of high frequency content in that kick, like it's real slappy, then you might find something. But if you have something pretty boomy and low, like you're probably not going to find a whistle tone. In that scenario, you're looking for more more like mud, like things that are going like ooh, ooh, like, very like weirdly sustaining. Like it doesn't feel like it's sustaining like in the same way as the rest. As you kind of like scroll through, you're gonna hear like this isn't resonating the same way as the rest of the drum. Like it's resonating much longer than the rest of the drum. Or the rest of the frequencies. I mean, when you're doing snare, you might get a little bit of both. You probably will get some whistle tones in the snare. I mean, essentially a whistle tone and a muddy tone are basically the same thing, just in a different frequency range. But like, essentially like, because a whistle tone is essentially a high frequency that's just resonating a lot longer and a lot more than the rest of the high frequencies. When a muddy tone is just the same thing for the low end. But basically, like, you're listening for like things that are popping out, things that are resonating a weirdly long time. Especially when you have a live snare drum, you hit it and it's like, there's one frequency that's just like, the snare goes, and then there's like another frequency that's like, bing, like through the entire thing. Like it's just like ringing, like that kind of thing. Just gonna eat some food real quick. All right. Now, generally, when I'm dealing with hi-hats and that kind of stuff, I'll generally do any kind of, like, if I'm going to put, like, the F6, I'll generally do it within the context of the regular, of, like, all the other drums. And pretty much honestly, like, I pretty much do the same thing with hi-hats. Like, honestly, most hi-hats are just hi-hats. Like, they all react and do the same thing. So I'll generally do this on the hi-hats. I'll get a little bit of some more bright end. I'll turn the Q all the way down. Oh yeah, I'll make sure it's a shelf. Turn the Q all the way down, which basically makes it a straight line. And then I'll play it. Yeah, so I usually will just kind of put a little bit of a high boost on the F6, like with just a little bit. Just brings a little bit of high end, a little bit of brightness without making it super bright. Like, it's really only going to bring a little bit of brightness to the accents, really. it honestly, I think, makes it a little bit more dynamic. I think a lot of times hi-hats can be lacking dynamics. They'll tend to just be like, 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 or like, especially with hip hop, they tend to be very like, like very like uniform because they're like not played by a person. So I do try to manually try to adjust that when I'm in Logic, but then I can add a little bit more pizzazz to it in a mixing contest. Mixing content. Not contest, content. And just try to bring out the dynamics that I did try to imprint into it, try to just make that come out a little bit more. It makes this part that is, not perfectly like, like perfectly like every hi-hat is the exact same velocity and it's perfectly in rhythm and it's the exact same velocity. To a little bit more swaggy, like digging in a little bit on the beat, just makes it feel a little bit more human. It's got a little bit of breath in it. So no, I can turn that off. That's pretty much all I'll ever do with a hi-hat. Like, honestly, I probably won't touch his hi-hat for the rest of the project. Like, that is probably going to be the final hi-hat right there. All right. Except for I'm going to do some panning on the hats for the little filth kind of stuff. All right, so we'll add in this shaker part. Right there, whistle tone. So it's like sustaining through the whole thing, meaning that it's just resonating. It's resonating and resonating, that's one you gotta cut. Like that's sort of the example, like where like if you just shift it over just a little bit, you're gonna hear that difference. Like, so you won't hear here. It's a little bit there, but not bad. It's not worth, comparatively. Boom, it's just like coming through. So I'm gonna pull that out. See, it just made the shaker 10 times more articulated, because now it doesn't have like resonating through the entire thing. Now you can actually hear like it's not just like all right. Right there. Bring that down just a little bit. Some people might have a tendency to be like, oh, there it is, cut it, and like cut it all the way down to the bottom, like as low as you can make it. I think sometimes that can kind of mess things up a little bit, especially the further down you pull it, the more like open space you're gonna have at the top. Like it's gonna come out, because it's gonna come out like funneling out and up like this. So the more you pull it down, you're gonna have that kind of like more room for error, or not error, but like more room for like affecting other frequencies. So like basically only pull it out as bad as you kind of think it is. Like this blue one, or green one, I mean, was like only a little bit bad. Like it was not as bad as this one. So I'm not going to pull it down as far as that. And I'm not going to pull this one all the way down just because I think it's really bad. Like, you kind of basically like pull it down like as much as it kind of pops out. You're not trying to eliminate it. You're trying to bring it so it matches the rest of the things around it. There might be some that you have to pull out all the way. There might be something really, really bad, especially when you're dealing with microphones and that kind of stuff. There might be some kind of room tone that you can barely hear in real life, especially if like you naturally sit in a room where naturally in a place you can tend to not hear. You become ear blind because you're just hearing it all day. And then you hear it coming through a microphone and you're like, what the hell? You didn't even hear it because you hear it every day. Your ears have basically turned it off. So then for it to come out of your speakers is like, that's not normal. So, those situations might be like the only time you might actually do a full pull out. I've been streaming for an hour and a half already. Time flies. Ooh. Ooh. There it is. Ugh, there it is. Ugh. Maybe not. Yeah, that is so much better. So this is without. With. Gonna actually boost this up maybe a dB to make up compensate. Remember, that is so much better. All right, so I don't even maybe I'll put it in I'll probably just put this one on. Fun fact, if you don't know this, if you hit was it option? Yeah, option on Mac. I don't know what it is on Windows. Honestly, at this point, I'm going to stop referencing Windows keystrokes because I don't know them. You can look them up. I mean, I do for most of them. That's how I learned half of them. I went, hey, is there a better way to do this? And then I looked it up and I found it. So, but if you option click, you can drag copies of plugins from one to the other. So it's like, okay, I want, these are both kind of sitting in the hi-hat and the shaker kind of both sitting in the same kind of general area. So I'm like, I'm going to start with the same F6 from the hi-hat, and then I'll adjust it from there. The only thing you can't do is you can't drag a stereo plugin onto a mono track. I believe you can do it the other way. Let me check. Can I do it the other way? Yes, you can. You can drag a mono plugin to a stereo track and it will convert it to stereo, but you can't go the other way. So if I try to go back, can't do it. Which is kind of weird, to be honest. I guess because it's easier to just, in theory, copy over the mono and then just dual, make it a dual mono kind of thing, versus like if you have a stereo one and you actually do like a dual mono thing and you bring it over to the mono one, which one is the algorithm supposed to pick? Your left channel or your right channel? Which one do you want? It doesn't know, so it just avoids making the decision altogether. Okay, so let's get the whole drum set going here. Yeah, so again, this is adding a little bit of life, creates a little bit of contrast when you have dynamics. Because basically what it's going to do is going to start to make those dynamics a little more audible, and also try to reflect the way that sound would be affected if a human were playing. Like if you think about a drummer really playing, like, or if I take a real shaker and I go, like, and go from softer to harder, shaking, like you're gonna agitate more high frequencies the harder you shake. So by doing this, where I'm setting a threshold, so as it increases its velocity, it's going to like slowly boost the high end of the shaker, so that it'll actually kind of emulate that, where it has this sort of like the high end gets more emphasized, like the harder you shake it, or the harder you hit it, or the harder you strum the guitar. Like, think about when you have an acoustic guitar and you strum it really hard, it sounds very thin and tinny, like because you're hearing like a lot of like the pick hitting the string and that kind of stuff. Like, you're agitating the strings a lot more, they're vibrating off the neck, kind of thing. Like, you're adding high end frequencies by hitting it harder or strumming it harder. It's sort of emulating that same kind of thing. That's why I love this plugin. This is probably my most used plugin. Like, every track on this will probably have an F6 going. Yeah, like, I thought I had the real. Why is this? There we go. Okay, I just had to turn it off and then turn it on and back off again. All right. So now I got the whole drums going. So let's do the before and after of the whole drum set. All right, so that's without. And then I'll put all these back on. And then listen to it again. Yeah, so kick is a lot more articulated, a lot less boomy. I am still going to play around with it a little bit. Try to get I do still want the length of it to be a little bit longer. I'm going to try some regular compression with that, and maybe a little bit more EQ beyond that. But it's definitely right in the right direction. The snare sounds so much better. The snare doesn't sound like, I don't even know how to describe the snare before. Yeah, it's like ringy. There's like frequencies ringing out. It just feels kind of bleh. Like when it's hitting, it's like bleh, blah, blah, blah. Like, it's like blah. Like it's like a teenager who doesn't want to do their chores or whatever. Or like say bye to their grandma. They're like, bye grandma, whatever. And then with the EQ and the F6, it's like a lot more like, yeah, it's like right there. It's giving me that backbeat, yeah. Like, honestly, it literally made the song feel slower when I turned that off. Oh my God, I was like, I felt my shoulders just kind of like going, ugh. Like, oh, who cares? All right, so now I got the drums going. Nice. Drums are ready to rock. All right, so now I'm going to do the bass. So I'm going to turn the drums off. I'm also going to enable the group mode, so these will not change unless they're all changing. And then I can also solo and unsolo them all at the same time. Great. Now, solo bass. I think I might bring these in. I think I might bring these into 25. They still seem a little wide. Like, I'm not looking for it to, like, there's so many other, like, wide elements. Like, all the keys are in stereo, basically. So I don't really need the I don't need the synth bass to be going full bore. Oh, yeah, that's a lot better. It kind of focused it, too. It's like, it's very, like, like, when it was, like, going back and forth, it just kind of felt a little wishy-washy. This kind of has a little bit of aggression now, like that. Yeah, so then, compared to this. Versus this. Actually, I can. Yeah, that sounds so much better. Just doing that. All right, nice. So when I have two basses, I'm emulating a technique that I've used and seen with bass guitar, like just standard like rock style bass guitar, where you have the DI and then you have the amp recording. And so what a lot of people tend to do, what I've seen, is they use one for one purpose and the other for another purpose. And basically, what you do is the DI is clean. There's no room tone. There's no nothing. It's DI. That's the benefit of DI, and it's pure. It is the sound of the bass, pure. Pure and simple. And so generally that gets used as the low end because it's a clean low end. And then what you'll do is you'll use like the more rough and tumble, there's more high frequencies, potentially there's some distortion on it or some overdrive or some kind of like saturation on it to begin with. And so you'll usually cut out that low end and then use it just for that kind of like high, gritty kind of articulation, and then use the clean low end. So it really blossoms really nicely together. And it also, like, low end frequencies will tend to clash with each other. So so you kind of avoid that as well, especially when it's like a bass guitar thing. In this sense, I don't think there's any phase issues. Not that I can hear anyway. But, yeah, so, basically what I'm doing is, like, I'm cutting out any high end, which there didn't seem to be, just to make sure. And then basically, like I brought up, one, because you want to avoid having anything below like 150 hertz, not in mono. So I basically put the high pass filter up to 150 on the synth bass, since it is panning back and forth. Just to keep the 150, and then I'll do something else on top of that just to even cover my bases even further, which I'll show you. Another plugin I bought recently, which I'm still kind of playing around with. I don't have a real opinion on it because I haven't used it that much. I've used it maybe 2 or 3 times so far, but I'll show you what that is. But yeah, so let's hear this. That's not what I want. That's honestly, I don't know if it did anything. I honestly don't even remember. I might have even done something like this in Logic to begin with, just because I knew it was gonna be like that anyway. So, but whatever. So then this, I'm gonna add again the plugin I was just referring to. What was it again? It was new. It was. Yeah, here it is. Mongoose, like mono. So what this does is you can set the crossover frequency of a particular part, particularly a stereo part, and you basically, like, you set the crossover. So I'm going to set it to like, I'll do a 160 something. And then you basically, like, anything below that is under the low category, and anything above it is under the high category. And then basically you can set this to mono. There's no width below 166 hertz, and then there's, full, stereo spectrum above that, which I've then negated by making it 25 and 25. But it'll go the full 25 and 25. Like if I were to make this 25 and 25, 25, then it would, pretty sure it would make that, I'm pretty sure it would make this 7.25 or 6.75, whatever a quarter of 25 is. So it's 12 and a half. Yeah, 6.25. Okay, trying to do math here. What the hell? So I'm pretty sure it would do that at the very worst. At the very least, it would do nothing. So I'll just keep it to full because I know it'll do nothing. Okay, so this won't even really be audible, so I'm not even going to do it back and forth. All right, so now what I'm going to do is I've got this to a nice blend that I like. So I'm going to put the group on for it, and then I'm going to do the drums and the bass, and I'm going to blend it basically. Cool. That sounds really good. Yeah, another little fun fact, if you do have a group on and you want to do something exclusively to one track, so say I wanted to like solo and unsolo this, even though they are grouped together, I hit the control key. You hold the control key and then click, and you can basically bypass the group. You can do that for the fader changes and everything too. Like these are grouped, so they'll move together. Damn it. All right. But if you do control and then like that, then you can, and if you hold control and option, you can then do, then you can still do the option click. So you do control option click, and then you bypass the group and do the option click. So yeah, so it's like, that's a nice little tool. It definitely saves time than having to turn the groups off and on all the time. But yeah, so I'm just to be safe. I'm actually gonna put the mongoose again on the bass bus, just to make sure. Like, yeah. All right, so now I'm going to bring up another gain staging thing here. So as I'm doing this, I literally have just the drums and bass going, and I'm already peaking over -5. So I still have half the track to add. Plus there are vocals that aren't even in the session yet. So what I'm going to do then is I'm going to go all audio tracks, and I'm going to bring everything down a little bit. So I'm going to make anything that's 0 minus. I always think of like what is the highest thing, which is usually something at 0. I will generally avoid going above 0, unless like unless I like, unless it's like kind of if it's simple as like, okay, I want to go up 1 dB. I don't want to bring everything down 1 dB just so I can bring something back up a dB to make it 0. Like in that scenario, it's like, whatever. Like, but in this scenario, like I'm usually going to put a ceiling at 0 dB. So take the thing at 0 dB, which is kick or bass. And then I'm going to bring it down, maybe 5 dB. Okay. So now we're back in a nice healthy spot. And you might say like, oh, but it's just going to get quieter. Like, oh, now you have to listen to it quieter. No, you turn your volume up. Like the volume that comes out of your speakers is not necessarily linked to the volume or signal level in your DAW. So like if like this doesn't matter. This is abstract. This is simply what a meter is doing, like these faders. It's going, okay, your original signal length is whatever. You're now taking that signal and boosting it or cutting it, plus or minus however many dB. That is not a fixed, like, objective volume. Like, that is not an objective volume amount, and so like that kind of thing coming into question, like what's the volume of this, like what is the objective volume of this track, is when that's what you do when you get into mastering, dealing in like objective, like what is the broadcast volume of this, like what is the like standards, plus or minus 0 dB, like what is the volume of this. There is like a standardized system of what they call loudness. Like there's a difference between volume and loudness. Volume is a relative basis. So like this track is whatever loudness it is, and it will vary because that's what mixing is. You're varying the loudness of different elements, but the overall loudness, the volume is like, okay, whatever that is, plus or minus whatever. You turn your volume up, you're adding decibels. If you're turning your volume knob down, you're subtracting. You're not changing anything really. You're just subtracting from the base objective loudness. So, whereas loudness is the, like, based on a certain scale, they're called LUFS. Basically, like, that is like the scale of objective loudness, or objective, to create a more layman's term kind of thing, an objective volume. So it means, like, anything that is at minus 14 LUFS, is going to be the same loudness as another song at minus 14 LUFS. And then it comes into standardization, like with Spotify. Spotify and Apple Music and that kind of thing. They have loudness thresholds. And so, which is minus 14 for Spotify, at least. Apple Music, I think, is a slightly different one, but it's still pretty close. So, like, they will, if your track is more than minus 14 LUFS, it's going to turn it down to minus 14 LUFS. If it's below minus 14 LUFS, if it's minus 16, if it's minus 18, it's going to turn it up. And so that's sort of the broadcast volume level. Like, these will be set to minus 14 LUFS, an objective loudness, period. That used to not exist. That's how we got into the loudness wars, because everyone was like, oh, I'm going to keep compressing my track. I'm going to make it louder. I'm going to make it louder. I'm going to be the loudest track on the radio. Like, and it was like, it just created these disgustingly squashed and distorted tracks, especially once we started getting into the digital world, because, like, the early adopters of digital had no clue how it worked. They were like these guys that spent their entire careers and their entire lives working on analog equipment. They were recording to tape. They were, like, running through consoles. They had to use hardware. They didn't have plugins. They didn't know what that, and so basically what happened was, like, they got to digital and they're like, yeah, put it in the red. I love it in the red. And then what they didn't realize was that the red is horrible in digital. Like, you can't just peek out a digital meter. That's not going to sound good. It's not a VU meter, because VU meters are different than these meters. They're called full scale meters, dBFS, decibel full scale. And so what that means is that 0 is truly 0, versus 0 on a VU meter is equivalent to minus 12 or minus 18 or something like that, maybe minus 16. I think it might be minus 16. Honestly, I don't even remember completely. And I think there might be even some variation from that. Like, some might be 14, some might be 16, some might be 18, some might be 12. Like, I think it was even variation, from reality to, like, from, like, real equipment to digital equipment. But basically, like, they were just like, where on the old school consoles and stuff, it was not uncommon to, like, take the fader and go like that. That was not uncommon. If you wanted it at max volume, you went like that, and you pushed the fader all the way to the top. Like, you put pedal to the metal. This is not the equivalent of doing that on a console. Doing this on a console would be like if you did that on an individual channel and then turned the master bus fader up again. So like it's like dual in the red. Like you're just like blowing out you're blowing out the channel. Like, so like they didn't really understand that well when they first got into that kind of stuff. And there weren't really any resources for that kind of thing. And so they just started destroying music. That's why they thought digital sounded bad, because they tried to treat it like analog. It's not like analog. It's not at all like analog. Like, it's clean and crisp and clear, and it's gonna show you everything. Like, if you like, yeah, that's not necessarily what you want. That's true, but it means that you can still do what you want. You just have to do something to make it sound like that. Not just, it used to be back in the days like, yeah, dude, if you just run the thing through this one piece of hardware, it's going to make it sound amazing. I didn't even touch the knobs and I made it sound amazing. That doesn't happen in digital. You don't, I don't open my stock EQ on Pro Tools and go, oh my God, that fixed the whole track. Oh my God, that fixed the whole track. I didn't even touch it. I just put it on. And it fixed the whole track. Like, no, that's not how digital works. You don't just run your track through some random compressor or EQ without even like touching the knobs and have it. Oh my God, it sounds amazing now. Like, I'm not saying that doesn't exist. I'm not saying that was fake. I'm saying that doesn't work in digital. So like they didn't have the sort of skill set or the mindset or the workflow for that kind of thing. They were used to like just everything you plugged in did something to the sound, versus digital basically does nothing to the sound. So it was like they heard high frequencies. It was like they heard 18K for the first time in their life, because you're running it on tape, you're running it through all this gear, you're running it through tubes, and then you're printing it onto vinyl. Like, no way are you going to hear 18K. Like, no way are you going to hear 18K. Even now, you listen to Led Zeppelin on Spotify, there's no high end in that. Like, it sounds muddy as hell. That's what Led Zeppelin is supposed to sound like. I'm not saying it sounds bad in the context, but like, that's not what digital sounds like. So like they heard a clear, beautifully recorded track, and they went, oh my God. Like, and then especially like, because they used to have to compensate for that low end loss, they're taking all their EQs and they're just shoving the high shelf all the way up all the time. And they tried to do that in digital, and they blew their eardrums out. And like, they were like, oh, digital sounds like crap. Digital sounds horrible. It's so bright. Because you made it bright. You can't work with digital the same way you work with analog. It's not the same beast. That's why there are plenty of new engineers who probably don't even know how to work a compressor, like a physical compressor. They don't know how to route audio. All the audio routing they've ever done is in their DAW. Oh yeah, put a bus on it and I'll route it to put an aux track on it. Like, they didn't have aux tracks. So like, it's a different game, and some people know both things and some people don't. Like, I'm very much a middle ground kind of guy. I think there's benefits to both. This is a hip hop track. I'm not going to bust out a rack of equipment necessarily on a hip hop track, because that's just not how you make a hip hop track. If I'm doing a rock band or a country artist, I'm not going to put auto-tune on my country artist. Doesn't mean I'm not going to tune their vocals, by the way, but I'm not going to put auto-tune, on their vocals. I'm going to use some more acoustic get some more acoustic analog gear, acoustic gear, more acoustic things. I'm going to worry about how I place microphones and things like that. Like this track, the only microphones that are going to be on this entire track are the vocal mics. So, everything else is just going to be digital, purely digital. So, even plugins, like, I might not, I have a lot of the vintage style emulation kind of stuff. Like, I have like the CLA 70. Well, I probably will use this because I use this on everything. But, things like, I might not use, the SSL channel. Like, like I might not use this, or I might use it very minimally. Like I might use it just to kind of do a gentle coloring, but like I'm not gonna I'm not gonna tone shape, with it, that kind of thing. So yeah. Honestly, I don't even know why I was talking about this. I totally went on a rant. Why was I talking about? Oh yeah, because I was talking about decibel levels and abstract stuff. All right. Anyway, moving on. Damn, I've been streaming for over 2 hours already. This is gonna be a long one. But anyway, so moving on. Oh yeah, I have all the. And that. All right. Once I get into this stuff, like drums and bass are very particular. Once I get into this stuff, it gets a little bit more relaxed. Especially because it's all digital. Like there's no, so like, I don't really need to worry about too much in terms of like tone shaping and like really trying to craft a sound. Like, it's digital. I've already made it 90% of the way there. I thought this had a thing to make a mono. Maybe, I'm thinking of Logic. How do I make this mono? Sound field? Yeah, so I put a little bit of put a little bit of an EQ. Make sure the low end is not interfering. I don't think there was any to cut there anyway. I wanted a little bit of a larger stereo field, a little bit more of an obvious stereo field. So I do this trick. I don't even know what it's called. But basically, like, you take a dual mono or stereo one that you can unlink pitch tool, and I basically take the left one and I bring it down 4 cents, and bring the right one and bring it up 5 cents, give or take. I found like it doesn't really, like, I feel like if you do it too much, it's like sounds weird, and if you do it not enough, it doesn't do anything really. I found like somewhere between 7 and 10, like, total. Like right now with this is 9. Somewhere between 7 and 10 is usually the hot spot. For it to like really kind of like become a little obvious, but not too much. So yeah, so it makes it a little bit wider in the stereo field. That makes it a little more obvious in the stereo field. Then I put a little bit of an EQ after that, just some real general. Again, cutting probably nothing here, but it just makes me feel good, and I just kind of like when it goes. So, but then I boosted the high end here. I boosted the high end. To make it kind of stand out a little bit more, kind of give it a shimmery quality out on the sides. So yeah. And then I put a little bit of compression. This is a LA2A style compressor. It's the CLA2A, which is a pun technically, because it's Chris Lord Alge's signature. Sorry, Chris Lord Alge's signature model. I don't know how it's his model. Like he invented the LA2A. But yeah, so it's like saying LeBron James invented Sprite. Yeah, so just a little bit of compressing. I really like the LA2A style compression for like big, long, like I'm trying to add some big, long, slow compression that's just going to gently touch it and just kind of keep it a little bit full-bodied. This is a full-body kind of compressor versus something like the 1176 style. Again, CLA 76. Like he invented the 1176. Is more of a. Honestly, I view the 1176 almost like a transient designer, and the CLA is more of just kind of like vocal writing kind of thing. Like it's just kind of gently riding the volume a little bit is kind of how I view it in my own head. Give me a couple minutes. I'm just going to take a quick bathroom break, grab another drink, and I'll be right back. So just stick with me here. Be right back. All right, I am back. All right. It's been about 2.5 hours. I think I might cap it at 3. If I'm not done at 3 hours, then I'm gonna just cut the stream. All right. I think that sounds pretty good for now. Let's go to the piano. So with this piano here, it is a virtual piano, which you would, if you were watching, you would know that. That sounded kind of passive aggressive. If you were watching, you kind of know that. No, in a previous stream, I brought up how I switched the piano out from my one of the standard Logic piano sounds to a third party piano. It's the Addictive Keys one, and so it's like an actual like sampled piano. I forget. I feel like I heard the studio that they recorded it at. But I forget what studio it was that I like heard somebody like, I was like watching a studio tour and they like mentioned something. I forget if it was for Addictive, but it was like their piano got sampled by somebody, but I forget who it was that they said, if it was Addictive or if it was somebody else, but yeah, so it's an actual like sample piano, so I am gonna make sure I put a high pass filter just in case that the sample itself has room tone in it or like any kind of low rumble. I am gonna put a little bit of a high pass on there just to be safe. All right. Yeah, so I don't want it to have any even though it does have that low note, I don't want the low note to be a low note. Like I want that to just be an extra little like it is low in comparison. Like it's still pitched lower, but I don't want that. I don't want it to be the body of like this is not like some piano ballad where it's like, you have boom 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 boom, like boom 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 boom, like where you want that low octave in the left hand to be like this impactful thing. Like no, it's just this like extra little like rhythmic like doom 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 doom. So like it's not supposed to like be the bass line or anything like that. Like I don't want it to blend with the bass line at all. It's not the same rhythm as the bass line at all. Like I just want it to be this like sort of like low mid kind of like thing. So I cut the low end out. I cut a little bit of the high end out just because it is very bright. And I put a lot of the brightness into the pad. So I cut basically where the pad is boosted. I cut a little bit there, and then I boosted in the high mids kind of like area to make it stand out a little bit more from the pad. In fact, I might go and do this real quick. Gonna make this an REQ4. Okay, good. I actually saved it. Okay, so what I'm gonna do here is I'm gonna take this. I'm gonna take it to the place that I boosted it. I'm actually gonna bring this up a little bit higher. Okay, and then where I boosted in the piano, I'm gonna cut it just a little bit, just a tad, just a touch, just a touch. I love that video. I love that Gus Johnson video where he's doing Gordon Ramsay. He's like, oh, just a touch of olive oil, just a touch of olive oil, just a touch of olive oil. Like, just I love that video. I reference that video every time I make food. All right, let's see how that sounds. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a little trick here. I'm going to take a compressor. I'm going to take the R comp. I love this compressor. This is a great, like very basic, not basic, but like very standard, like not like an emulator type compressor. Like it's basically like a really good stock compressor, but it's not stock because it's a waves compressor, but like it's really good. I really like the UI of it. I like the way that it it's very easy to see how much compression you're actually applying. Great compressor. Like if you are going to spend money on one compressor plugin, like get the R comp. Like you could having the nice 1176 or the LA2A emulator, that's great. But like if you don't even understand how those work, it's not going to benefit you in any way. Like this is a nice, easy, simple compressor that if you're looking for something a little bit nicer than your stock compressor, but you want it to still kind of function like your stock compressor, this is a great EQ. I mean, a great compressor. Same thing with the REQ, the Renaissance EQ. It's the same thing. It's basically just a stock EQ and a stock compressor, but it's a little nicer. I think it does have some coloration, in terms of like analog style coloration, but it's not a lot. It's very minimal, great. Like, I think they might come in like a Renaissance pack. So definitely worth like getting it. I I got mine from school. I got the REQ and the R comp. Did it come with the other like R stuff? Let me see. Did it? REQ, R comp, R verb. So it came with the. So I got the R comp, the REQ, and the R verb. I never use the R verb, although I know a lot of people do use it. It's just not my style in terms of reverb. Like, maybe I'll try it out a little bit more in the future, but right now, like, it's just like I got a favorite reverb. Like, in fact, it's pretty much the only reverb I ever use. Which you'll see probably not in this stream, but in further streams. But it's really great. I really like it. I'll just tell you what it is, but you won't actually see me use it. But it's the Soft Tube Tsar 1 reverb. Tsar is in like Russian Tsar, like TSAR, Tsar 1. Is that how you spell Tsar, or is it with a C? Is there two spellings of Tsar? Is there a T1 and a T1 and a C1? Whatever. It's sort of like that. It's TSAR -1R reverb. The Tsar 1 reverb. Great reverb. It's very simple. I'll bring it up so you can see it. Okay, apparently the Tsar 1 reverb takes a lot to open. Yeah, so it's very simple. It's just like, it's almost like an emulation of like the old like digital reverb units, like back like when it was still analog, but then like they were the digital thing was starting to come in as like units, like you put it in your rack just like any other analog equipment. I think it's emulating one of those, which I have no experience with, but like it's very simple. Basically, like you got bright, neutral, dark, which is like it's gonna emphasize the high end, cut the low end. This is gonna cut the low end, emphasize cut the high end, emphasize the low end, and this is just gonna be kind of flat. So that's kind of nice when you want to have like multiple reverb sources that are similar but different. Like I'll usually make the like shorter reverbs neutral, and then I'll make the longer ones bright, like on a single source. Like sometimes I like to put two reverbs on a vocal track. I like to put a shorter one on a longer one, and I'll use this for both of them. And I'll just keep like the shorter one neutral and then the longer one bright, just to kind of differentiate them a little bit. And of course I'll put some EQ on the reverb tracks as well. Like I like to do the Abbey Road technique where you cut the high end and cut the low end. Like you put a low pass and a high pass filter on it, like pretty tight. And then occasionally like booster cut in the middle of that. I like doing that a lot, just because it really keeps reverb from getting a little out of control. It makes it a little bit easier to control the reverb. You can also play around with longer reverbs that way, because they'll be less. You'll have the length, but not as much of like the just overpowering, like wet, disgusting, like you're in a church. That sounded really like I'm talking shit on churches, but like just big, boomy, open, like, echoey, just disgusting. Like it doesn't sound good at all. Like, like your church pastor's trying to say the sermon, but you hear it 12 times over the course of 8 seconds. Because it's just like, and the Lord, and the Lord, and the Lord. And then it says, blah, 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 and you can't understand a single word he's saying because it's just echoing over himself. It kind of helps avoid that kind of thing, and still have longer reverbs than you might normally use under certain circumstances. But yeah, so anyway, so I'm going to take this compressor, the R comp. I'm going to do a send here. I'm going to do it to a bus. I'm going to do bus 4. I'm going to rename this cause PNO sidechain. So then I'm going to send this full force. I'm going to make this pre-fader so it's always working whether I have the piano muted or not. I'm going to turn this all the way down. Going to turn the auto release off. Turn this all the way down. I'm going to take this. I'm going to put it to 2 to 1. So it's just a little gentle compression. It's really hard to read this. I think I need new glasses. 2.1, 2 to 1, and then I'm gonna set this key to the piano side chain. So every time the piano, this is now getting triggered by the piano, not by the pad. I've now bypassed this. This is no longer receiving the signal from the pad. It is now exclusively receiving signal from the piano, so that the threshold will trigger from the piano, but will start to compress the pad. And so what will end up happening is every time the piano crosses that certain threshold, it will start to dip the pad just a little bit, give it a little bit of room for that piano. So I'll play this and then I should probably take the reverb off of this. Like you can just slightly hear, like you can kind of hear the piano rhythm kind of in the compressor, like and it's going to make just a little bit of room for that. I think I might actually make this like a full 3 to 1. So listen to it without. Yeah, so it just makes a little bit of room. It just ducks it just a little bit. Just a little bit. And only when the piano's really digging in. Yeah, so I really like that trick. I do that a lot. What you can also do is you can do that on the bass with a, I like to do with the F6. So put an F6, doom, doom, Okay, and then I'm going to set this to the kick sidechain. I'm going to put this on here, make a pre-fader, do this. Okay, so now this is receiving the kick sidechain. So what this does is it actually separates the sidechain and the non-sidechain into every individual thing. So you can have part of them being triggered by the actual thing itself, and part of it being triggered by the sidechain itself, by the sidechain. So like if I want this, I can make this one be triggered by the actual bass itself and make this one triggered by the kick, or whatever. Any way you want it. That's the way you want it. Any way you want it. So I'm going to take this, obviously, because it's in the low end. I'm going to set this to the 62 that I have boosting on the kick, and I'm going to change the source to external. So you have internal source and external source. External being the side chain, and then do this, and then I'm going to have it dip like I don't know, 3 dB, and then you play it, boom. You know what? I think I might put this on the stereo, on the bass bus instead. Oop. Cancel that. All right. I'm also going to put it at 150, which is where I think a lot of the articulation of the kick is coming through. So I'll do the same thing for that as well. Put that out there. I believe if you solo it, you actually hear. Yeah. Yeah, so when you put it on solo, even though that this compressor is on the bass, if you hit the solo, you'll actually hear the frequency of the side chain. So you can actually use that for reference as well, which is really nice. Again, another reason why this is the best plugin ever made. Like literally, it's the best plugin ever made. So anyway, do that. So now you're really hearing that kick, like beautifully through that bass. Beautifully. It's giving it its time and its space. And the nice thing about doing it with this, with the F6 is you're only doing it to particular frequencies, versus like what I have on the pad is doing it to the whole pad, like the whole frequency spectrum of the pad. It's literally dipping the whole pad volume a little bit. This is only doing it in those frequencies. So like one, I already have a side chain on the synth bass. That's how it's making its rhythmic kind of thing. So I don't want to mess with that rhythm by adding some side chain from a kick that is not playing the same rhythm. And so like I just want to carve out that little bit of space. So, yeah. I really like using this for side chaining. It's really, really good. It really, really works really well. Like amazing. I think I might actually back this down just a little bit. I might make it 2 instead of 3. Wrong way. Okay. I think I might have to do a little bit of a boost here. What do I have this one going? 3. I might just do this one like 1.5. Really quick here. Make this 2. And then yeah, that sounds really good. I feel like I'm hyping myself up. All right. Now we'll do this. So this Rhodes is mostly during the verse. So I'm going to put a little bit of verse in now. All right, it's been just over 3 hours. We'll leave off with this. We'll do a little bit of a listen, and just kind of see what we did here. Awesome. This is sounding really, really good. Not to pat myself on my own back, but yeah, this is sounding really good. Yeah, so I think we're gonna end the stream now. And thanks for anyone who joined me, who's watching, who will be watching in the future. Again, when this goes up, it will be on YouTube in full. As soon as YouTube basically puts it on YouTube, it like auto does it when I finish when I finish the stream. So whenever that goes up, it'll be up live. Well, up not live. But so thank you for joining me. Now and in the future. If you want to give me a follow on my social media. Follow me up in the upper right here. You can see my social medias. My Instagram is at MattJohnsonAudio. My Facebook is MattJohnsonAudio. And my website is MattJohnsonAudio.com. On my website, you can find more details about me and my services. If you're interested in my services professionally, check out my website, look at the details, look at my prices up there. Also, if you follow my social media, I'll keep you updated on when my streams will be happening and whatnot. I may be streaming again in a little bit. I might take a maybe 10 or 20 minute break, and then on my gaming channel on Twitch, it's MattJohnsonAudio_gaming. I'm just going to be doing some casual gaming. I just figured if I'm going to be playing video games, I might as well stream it. So I might be on there tonight at some point, maybe in the next 20 minutes or so. Just going to get up, stretch my legs, and that kind of stuff. I haven't even finished eating from the start of the stream 3 hours ago. It's just been like I still got half a bowl of food sitting here. I'll finish eating and that kind of stuff. Take a little stretch, and I might be up on the gaming channel. So if you want to just hang out on the gaming channel, it's exclusively on Twitch, MattJohnsonAudio_gaming. Not really sure not really sure what I'm gonna be playing yet. I just got one cast. So I might play some Xbox. I also have remote play. So I might be doing some PlayStation. I was playing The Division earlier, which was kind of a fail. Because the game is like heavily online oriented in terms of like online collaboration. Like you're supposed to matchmake for like the story missions, and that game is very old, and you can't find anybody. Nor do I want to play with other people, so that was kind of a fail. So I ended up just playing some Battlefront 2. So if you want to join me in my gaming channel, just chat and hang out, you can feel free to do so. If you're watching this later, that means you can go look at my gaming Twitch, and see if I'm online. I might be playing, I might not be. It's very casual. I'm not trying to make anything out of it. It's just kind of a thing, just to hang out. Realistically, I play a lot of video games. One, obviously, who doesn't like playing video games under the age of 40? It's just kind of part of my craft. I did study video game audio for a period at school as part of the program. So it's just kind of research. It's no different than as a musician, you listen to a lot of music. If you want to do game audio, you got to play a lot of video games. So That's just kind of an avenue for that kind of thing. So if you want to join, check out. You can join, check out. It's just gonna be super chill. People chat with me, I'll chat with them. But it's not really a big thing. Not that this is a big thing, but that's really not a big thing. I don't intend for that to, I don't intend on becoming a game streamer professionally. As opposed to this, I intend on being a musician professionally. But anyway, so if you want to, join me over there, that'd be great. If you want to follow me on my social media, that's also great. If you want to work with me professionally or want to see what I offer professionally, you can check out my website, MattJohnsonAudio.com. Again, thank you for joining me now and in the future. So I will see you next time.